Tommy Simpson, a British cyclist in the 1967 Tour de France, died as a result of use of amphetamines. And here again we had a situation where a cyclist had been cited several times in the past, but had been allowed to continue to compete, and he died from the use of amphetamines. Amphetamines back in those days were commonly used, not just by athletes, college students. Was very common for them, to pull all-nighters by staying up all night. That was no great surprise to anybody back then. And the dangers of amphetamines were not yet truly realized. Then we can skip ahead to the Seoul Olympics in 1988. Some of us are old enough to remember, right, Randy? The track and field star, Ben Johnson, a Canadian, who won the 100-meter dash in the Seoul Olympics in 1988. And I remember this very clearly. I can tell you almost exactly where I was when we saw him win the race. And just a couple of hours after he was declared the winner, the news reports started coming out that he had been using drugs, specifically steroids, because the drug tests came back positive for steroids. And very shortly after that word came out, Johnson left the Olympics in Seoul, took a jet right back to Canada, got off the plane incognito, and went into hiding for quite a while when that news came out. Eventually, Ben Johnson was disqualified. The world record that he broke, of course, was disqualified. And he was given the penalty of not being allowed to compete anywhere in the world for 2 years. Well, he didn't learn his lesson, because a few years after that, when he was competing again, he again tested positive for steroids and was banned for life. Then we have a rather poignant story coming out of the Munich Olympics. Of course, the Munich Olympics, probably best remembered for the attack on the Israeli athletes, but one of the more poignant athletic moments was this young man, a 16-year-old kid, Rick DeMont, champion swimmer in high school, had already set the world record for the 1,500-meter freestyle as a 15-year-old. And in the Munich Olympics, he finished first in the, I think it was the 400-meter breaststroke. I believe that was the one. He won the gold medal. And again, I remember exactly where I was when the news reports came out that he had won, because this was astounding, that an American had won the swimming competition. And then just maybe a half hour after that came the reports that a drug had been found in his urine. The drug was ephedrine. And the story goes that Rick DeMont is an asthmatic. So here you had an asthmatic, a champion swimmer, who was using ephedrine. He was using it actually legally because he had reported to the U.S. Olympic Committee that he was using ephedrine, and You could use ephedrine if you found it was medically necessary for his asthma. The problem was the USOC officials did not do their job and reported to the IOC, the International Olympic Committee. And just because of that failure of communication, DeMont, the gold medal was taken away from him right after that. And there had been efforts to adjudicate the situation. It took until 2001, what's that, nearly 30 years later, that the USOC recognized and admitted its culpability in the case, asked the IOC to restore DeMont's medal, but they refused. And to this day, DeMont, who is in the International Swimming Hall of Fame, is a well-known swimming coach in this country and worldwide, still doesn't have his medal. Might be one of those things where it's awarded posthumously. You never know, but someday justice will be done. Well, we're going to talk a lot about anecdotes about the use of drugs in athletic competition. But probably the most egregious example of widespread use of drugs in athletic competition, bar none, the East Germans. I remember the days back in the 70s when you'd look at the medals, you look in the newspaper, you see U.S., Russia, and East Germany had so many medals, and people wondered how come the East Germans gained so many medals. Well, you look in '68, the East Germans had a total of 25 medals. 107 to the U.S., 99, is that right? 91 to the Soviets. And suddenly, out of nowhere, came the East Germans. Well, now we know what was going on. And none of this was revealed until after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And that was official sanctioning of drug use by the East German government of its athletes. All this has been well documented through interviews and medical examinations of athletes who were exposed to these drugs. And Randy, there was I think it was it Frontline or Nova that had a program on a few years ago. What was it called? Doping for Gold. Is that the one? Yeah, Doping for Gold, which was all about the East German situation in the 1970s. And this is beyond comprehension. The health effects on these athletes, probably the best, a lot of the health effects we'll talk about with these drugs, much of it is anecdotal. But here you have official sanctioning of hundreds, if not thousands, of athletes, and we're able to follow their health situations. Among the women athletes who were given, the number of stillbirths, that they had miscarriages, far more than what would be expected from the general population in the country, and other health effects. So a lot of what we know comes out of that situation, the East Germans.